Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Behind the Scenes Live. That stands for BTS Live, episode number 15. I am Marty and Mark, your host, along with Mark Rogers. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. Doing just fine. It's a nice sunny day,
for the folks
here in Connecticut.
What was that?
Nice sunny day here in Connecticut.
Yes, huh? Finally. And it was a great weekend, too. It was a nice, warm weekend, and we're getting closer to the end of February into March, so hopefully the weather starts turning a little bit better as we go. But just so, snow coming, guys. Yeah, I know. It always comes late. But just to give everyone a quick background, normally we stream the show in HD, and we also syndicate the Blab, but today I'm having major technical difficulties with my audio. So this is going to be a Blab-only show. I will post it. I will take the recording and post it to YouTube. Still working on my website. I'll probably run it as part of our reruns on btslive.com. In fact, just so you guys know what I've been experimenting with, taking a page out of Stephen Haywood's book, is I've been when we're not live on btslive.com, I've been running live re-airs or live reruns of the previous shows that we've done in a loop. So experimenting with that. So this will be part of that, and I'll hopefully I'll make this nice and cool with a nice open and all that stuff. But anyways. Even though we have technical difficulties, we have a great show for you today. I talked a little bit about Derek Crisler. Or is it Chrysler or Crisler, Derek?
Crisler is correct. You got it first try.
Okay, good. Derek Crisler. Derek is a former colleague of both Mark and myself from ESPN, from the ESPN days. Derek left in 2008, and he's gone on to bigger and better things. And I'm going to hand it over to Mark to handle a lot of this interview. But Mark, Derek, before I do that, why don't you just give everyone kind of an introduction of who Derek is and what you've been doing since departing from ESPN in 2008.
Okay. Well, as Marty mentioned, I left ESPN in 2008, looking for a way to get back to Iowa. I'm coming in from sunny overcast Iowa. It is a balmy 40 degrees here. We had 56 degrees on Saturday and then snow yesterday. So Iowa is similar to Connecticut weather patterns. But I left ESPN and was a communication instructor for Pittsburgh State University. That's my alma mater. And before you think Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you're wrong. It's Pittsburgh, Kansas, a small Division II school, but powerhouse in football. Think Nebraska before everybody came in love with passing attacks and everybody ran the option. That's what we still do at State. And I taught broadcasting classes there, and then I moved on to my position here at the City of Ames, where I'm the cable TV coordinator. I run the government and public access channels, and I am the only employee. I have 5 part-time production assistants / interns who work for me, running the government and public access channels, and I do everything there, from the planning, administrative activities to the on-the-ground video producing of all our shows. Like, that's a brief bio of my account for what I do right now.
Derek is being a little bit modest here. So I have some information to fill out the bio. So 22-person volunteer team also at church, correct? Directing
correct.
Up to 8 camera shoots, streaming those live to the auditorium screens live, and then also to video venue churches in nearby communities. Also a recipient of a number of awards recently, Best of the Midwest Video Fest, Best in Show Excellence Award for a documentary on the Ames Public Library, Excellence Award for a PSA produced on the Homewood Golf Course, and also a Merit Award for his firefighting recruiting video. I don't think that Derek also covered as many duties there as a cable TV coordinator for the City of Ames, writing, producing, editing, shooting, graphic design. He's responsible for scheduling 5 original programs per week, producing up to 5 live broadcasts per week, also deals with the budget, personnel, equipment management as well. But as Marty alluded to off the top, we know him best as a content integration producer working with us at ESPN for several years. And for me personally, as both captain and quarterback of our flag football team there at ESPN.
Those were good times.
That's right. Very good times. And also several times on the tennis court every summer, Derek and I doing battle. So good times and good memories, both professionally and personally, of Derek's time at ESPN. So Derek,
Marty and Mark, if I can interject real quick, I saw that there's a question up here for me. How do I respond to the questions in the question tab, Marty?
Yeah, I can bring that in if you want to tackle that. And the question is, Derek, do you use live streaming green screen in your work? Just see a little background. We get that green screen question a lot here. Since Blab is launched, a lot of people have got into it and want to really be creative and want to step up the game. So I think you're a perfect person to answer that question.
I do use virtual sets. I don't do them live streaming, however. All those shows that I do on the virtual set are pre-produced, and I actually use a blue screen. And I'll throw out a little bit of trivia there. Does anybody know why they use green or blue as the colors for chroma key sets? And obviously nobody can answer right away, so I will small pause for dramatics.
Well, before you go, this is a question we've actually asked the people in the room in previous shows. So hopefully someone has an answer, because I've covered this. So that's a good question. Leland's doing the Jeopardy theme.
There we go. We got a good one from Alexander Curtis over there. It is close to that. Is it opposite to skin color? Yeah. Green and blue are most noticeably absent in skin color, which is why those colors are used for chroma key sets. Allegedly, they say blue works better for blonde-haired people, but you will notice that most people wear green, probably because blue shows up in a lot of people's clothing. It's like I'm wearing blue today right now. And I do have a blue set, and I often have that trouble. Whenever I'm scheduling a chroma key set, I always have to remind and re-remind the talent, don't wear blue. And that means any kind of blue. So your navy, dark blues, anything like that. Now, today's chroma keyers have gotten so good that you can actually wear an off-shade color of blue depending on your background set and key it out. So behind Marty, that blue there, you see there's some highlighting effects with lights. You'd have some trouble keying that out, but you want to have it perfectly even color across the background. So we could actually take the background behind Mark, his looks pretty evenly lit, and we can chroma key that out. Now, we might lose some of his skin color there, so that's why you want to go with blue or green. So Johnny Ray, I don't know if that answers your question, but I do use chroma key sets. If you have another question, feel free to throw it up there. It is a useful tool, obviously, in a situation like mine where I'm at. You want to create some interesting backgrounds. Shooting outside presents all kinds of issues with controlling the light and the sun and that kind of thing. And chroma keys these days have gotten amazing. And a lot of programs and hardware and software have that built in, and they really do a fantastic job.
Now, before you get to the next question, I am using a green screen myself. So I'm using a TriCaster Mini, which has great green screen capability. I'm not sure what do you use for switching equipment, Derek, on as far as the public access, and do you use something different in your church work?
Yes. So for the government access channel, we have a broadcast pick switcher, which also has a chroma keyer built in. Everybody kind of has their own software plugin for that. NewTek's TriCaster works great, as Marty will probably attest to. One of the things I think that NewTek has really worked on is not worrying about the lighting, because when chroma keying first came out, your lighting had to be really even. And if you watch a lot of news channels with their weather forecasts, you can tell when they have bad lighting, because you'll start to see a glow around the weathercaster's hair, and you'll start to lose it there. But that lighting is key, and NewTek TriCaster has come out with some great stuff where the lighting doesn't have to be that great. I don't know, Marty, if you want to show them your background again, but I noticed there was like a little bit of a hot spot kind of right above.
Yep.
And it's keying out perfectly. Shadow there.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned. It's funny you mentioned lighting, Derek, and people who have seen me on Blab and other channels know I've told this story before about my lighting setup, but I'm only using 2 lights. I'm using a key light with a white umbrella, just from Cowboy Studio, very cheap light with a daylight balanced fluorescent there, and then one light as my hair shoulder light that's up above, another white umbrella that comes down. No light on the background whatsoever. And like you mentioned, like you picked up on it perfectly. Yeah, the TriCaster, I'm very fortunate. It does an incredible job with green screen. And so the reason why I arranged my lights like that, as you know, to get that highlight and shoulder and separation from the background. And then the key light is plenty to light it up. And then the background is even enough where I get a pretty good key out of it. Now, normally, if you're using inexpensive software, maybe Cam Twist or some of the other ones that you might hear about, and a lot of people know about Cam Twist, XSplit. I'm sure you've heard of these software. I'm not sure if you've heard of these, Derek, if you used these in the past, but they're less expensive options that, again, don't necessarily have the ability to really have a high quality key, and that's where the lighting comes in. But it's interesting you bring that up. Another good question, how do you avoid virtual overlay in the eye color? Do you ever have that issue?
I've been fortunate enough not to run into that issue for the most part. And a lot of it kind of depends on your shot composition. So Marty's shot right there, it's a fairly tight shot. So you don't have to worry too much about lighting. When you start to get into a full standing shot, which is one of the ones that I have for a full virtual set studio, then you run into some bigger issues with getting even lighting all the way down, even onto the floor. There's some neat tricks. Most of my, I should tell everybody, most of my keying, what we do is in After Effects or Adobe Premiere. So I'm able to go and I use Key Light. That's one of the built-in ones that come with Premiere. And again, with each new iteration, it just becomes better and better. But you can create shadows in post to make it look like they're in an actual studio. And it's a nice design, obviously. And as Marty mentioned, the backlight is important, so you get that separation. If you don't have the backlight, then Marty's going to kind of blend into the background, and it becomes very obvious that he's not in this fancy studio that he's portraying there. But as far as virtual overlay and eye color, there are a couple things you can do if you're working in post. If you're working in live, it kind of depends on your situation, but if you're in post, you can put masks over the face, and they have good things with tracking, especially in Premiere now, where you can just like track the eyes, and then you're not putting that chroma key overlay on the eyes. That would be my suggestion. If you're working in live, Marty, I don't know if you've had any experience with that. Does New Tech have anything for masks that you can put on areas?
Let's see. I've never had to do it. I'm just looking at not really. Nothing live, but I'm familiar. I work in Final Cut, and so I'm familiar with masking to help the key, and you can kind of adjust different areas using masks and things like that. So, but nothing live as far as my setup. Let's see. Might as well, Mark, I'm not sure if you have anything or you want me to continue with these questions. We are getting.
Yeah, you might as well run through the questions because that's what people are looking for. So yeah, we've got a number of questions here.
Okay. So Jens Oliver asks, how would you deal with a guest showing up in green if you're using a chroma key green background at the interview location? Is there a lighting or editing trick that you could use?
Yeah, there is. Sometimes if you're like on an outside location, most of those pop-up screens, they have blue on the backside. That's obviously the easiest selection. If you have anywhere that you're shooting that has another color that you can use outside of green or blue or anything that they're wearing or anything close to skin color, I mean, you can do red, you can do any solid color that's evenly lit. That would be the one thing that you would want to adjust to. I have had issues with my set where it's blue background. Somebody showed up with a navy blue suit, and I've actually just put a mask around them. And again, with masking and editing, After Effects, you can key that out pretty well, as long as you don't have somebody that's moving around a whole lot. If they're pretty stationary, and depending on who you're working with, if the guest is somebody that's under your employ, you can tell them, hey, try to remain as still as possible. We didn't have this. This will help us key you out better. And if it's just a guest, again, you can ask them as politely as you can, hey, it would really help us out if you could remain stationary. Obviously, you don't have that control all the time. You get people who are swaying. You're going to run into issues. If you have like another jacket or maybe some swag, like a nice ESPN shirt you can put over them that covers the green. If it's just the shirt top, maybe frame your shot so it's not the full body. So the less work you have to do on the screen to begin with, the easier your masks are going to be, the easier you can make that work. Or go all the way into the headshot. Cut the shirt completely out. Again, that depends on what your total end goal is, but those are some options you can get around the green clothing on.
So definitely, I mean, what I'm hearing is you want to do as much as you can when you're actually acquiring the original footage, get the lighting right as close as you can, and not rely too much on tricks and post. But if you have to, then masking is certainly a method that you can get around it. I mean, depending on how much work you have to do, and how many different masks you have to put on there, and how you have to position them, I guess that adds to the editing time.
Fixing in post is always a dangerous thing to say, because you want to get it right the first time if at all possible. And a lot of it goes into your pre-producing work. When I have a guest on the show that's going to be on the virtual set, I will send it the first time, say, hey, we have a blue screen, here's what I need you to avoid. I will send a reminder a couple days out, and then a friendly reminder like the night before, always the night before, because when people are going home, I try to do it at the end of the day, end of the business day, or whenever that person is leaving work, so that that's the last thing on their mind when they go home. So hopefully they will remember.
Absolutely.
I know Walter had commented earlier that he wanted to know Derek's workflow. I think he might need to be a little bit more specific in regards to workflow there, but I've seen that pop up a couple times.
Okay. I will try to answer that question. For workflow, I'm assuming the acquisition is what you're asking. So
yeah, because there's actually you can actually add in. I know John Newman too is asking about cams in the field or studio. So there's a couple of people asking the same thing. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. So the cameras that I work with are JVC. I have the 750 and the 650. The 650 is that shorter form body compact, and then the 750 is a shoulder mount form. The 750 is a 3CCD camera, and then the CMOS sensor is on the 650. Hopefully that's not too technical.
And I'm going to pause you right there. Just briefly explain, because normally, I mean, I think a lot of people on this show are used to fairly simple camcorders with one sensor, usually probably about 1/3 of an inch, versus a 3 sensor or a 3CCD camera. What would be the primary advantage of what you're using versus a single sensor?
The advantage with sensor size is the crispness of the image and the ability to handle low light situations. So if you're in a situation where lighting is not an issue, you can save a little bit by getting a cheaper camera that just has a CMOS sensor. Those are the cheapest ones to make. And then you'll still produce a pretty good image. It's when you get into low light situations with those cheaper cameras where you're going to start to notice a lot of pixelation. They're going to add a lot of electrical signal to your camera, adds a lot of noise. That's not going to give you the best result in the end result. One of the things that I wanted to mention on the show today was the biggest things that people will notice, and the differentiation between an amateur and a professional is lighting and sound. So you want to make sure that your lighting is good and your sound is good, and neither of which needs to be noticeable. So if your lighting has been noticed, then in my estimation, you failed. If your sound is noticeable, in my estimation, you failed, because the content, what you're delivering to the audience, that is the message you want them to take home. You don't want them to think, wow, his sound was really good. Now, obviously, tech guys like us are always going to be looking for things like that. Like, Marty, I want to ask you what kind of a microphone you got and how you like it. I was happy you mentioned the new Tech TriCaster. I love tech stuff. But for the general audience, they don't need to be thinking about that. They need to be thinking about, what is your message? What are you trying to convey to them?
We're getting a little echo here, so we're just going to let that calm down. This is part of the process here. But yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, Derek, that you make, because it almost when you another good analogy is when you watch movies, and especially movies that use a lot of special effects. And if you notice in the special effects as special effects, and the filmmakers probably failed, if it blends into the story where it's an enhancement and it's just part of it, and you just go with the flow, then you're doing it right. And I think I just want to emphasize what you're saying with lighting and sound. Yeah, it just should be part of the whole package, And again, with the audience that we have here, a lot of people are fairly new to video, especially Blab being a platform where it makes it very accessible, very easy to get on and actually do a show. And you don't need a lot of technical knowledge or equipment to get on. You need a webcam and a microphone. But as you advance, the lighting, these are some of the things you normally would see with people just starting out. They have issues with audio. Lighting might be noticeable, but yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, where you shouldn't even notice it. It should just blend into the background and just should be part of the production.
Hey, Derek, I'm curious. I was just going to ask about where you're seated and lit right now, because it's been my experience that if you're in front of a window, even on an overcast day, and even if you just blast the lights in that direction, that it's very difficult to offset the light coming in from the window. And you seem to have achieved that, where you have very even light just in the set that you have right there, even with the window in the background.
So I was very specific in the location that I picked. I got lucky by the fact that it's an overcast day. Overcast days are the best days to shoot outdoors because the clouds act as giant diffusers. They diffuse the light. You never want to shoot on a bright, sunny day outside because you're never going to outlight the sun. Don't try to do it even with $1 million lighting budget. It's difficult. So if you have an overcast day, it's a great day to shoot outside. On a side note, that's one question I always ask my interns when they're applying for positions with me, so I can tell if they know anything about shooting right off the bat. A lot of them want to say bright, sunny day because it's happy. I was like, no, you want overcast because you got good lighting. And to answer your question, though, Mark, I'm at the Ames Public Library. This is a brand new space. I came here for the Wi-Fi because it's way better than it is at City Hall where my office is, way better than it is at home. And I chose the windows in front of me. And if you'll allow me a little experiment, one thing you never want to do is you never want to put a light source behind you. As an example here, if I stand up and I come this way, this camera is actually doing a really good job, but you can see that's totally overexposed, that window behind me. A lot of times you get like a dark shadow or you start to lose coloring on the person and that light becomes a distraction. But the laptop I chose was also specific. I chose a MacBook with a pretty good web camera on it because you can get like super cheap web cameras and everybody's probably always thinking, I want to save money. I want to do this as inexpensively as possible, but you get what you pay for. So make sure when you're looking at buying a web camera, or if you have one that's integrated into your laptop or whatever the solution you are using, that you're looking at the amount of pixels that it produces. The bigger the number, the better the image is going to be.
Derek, I've got to say, and this is going back 15 years or so, but when I used to shoot sports, and this is on a professional camera, so this is either Beta or DVC Pro at the time, and you can possibly explain this because I would never want to argue lighting with either one of you. But on a bright sunny day, I'd throw that thing on a shutter on a bright sunny day to shoot like football camp or something like that, and you get just amazing effect on a bright sunny day with the shutter on a professional camera, the way it would like look and the colors would pop.
Yeah, so shutter speed is something you want to use when you're doing something with a lot of motion in the image, like sporting events. And bright sunny days help you out there because one, you're probably going to be shooting with the sun. I mean, you still don't want to shoot into the sun. You're shooting with the sun. That gives you the light that you need to close or open up your shutter. And that gives you the amount of much more pictures per image. And that'll make, like right now, you can see my hands are kind of choppy. If we had the shutter turned way up and I was outside, that'd be so smooth and super slow. That's good for instant replay. That's the reason you want to use your shutter. But for a lot of stuff like we're doing right now, you don't want to open up your shutter because then you don't need it. It's going to darken down your picture. It's going to make your picture look really dark. So when you're in studio work, there's not a lot of action. Shutter becomes kind of 1/60, 1/100, kind of an automatic setting.
Very good.
Yeah, I want to emphasize what you mentioned. I mean, you're giving incredible information here, and emphasize. That's the one thing I see too. Back in the day, I was a wedding photographer, and that's with the lighting you mentioned about being outdoors and bright overcast day is probably optimal. In fact, I'll even take it a step further. Even right after it rains, especially if you're doing nature photography, it's even better because the colors really pop. Being with the humidity in the air and also being overcast and a bright overcast, that's optimal. And it's funny because it goes against the grain what a lot of people think. Like you mentioned, people think, oh, bright sunny day, it's a beautiful day, it's going to translate very well to either film or digital image. And it's quite the opposite because the lighting is too harsh. It's like being in a studio and turning on a bare bulb. If you were in a house without, you take the lampshade off of a lamp, and that's why we have lampshades. It's very harsh. And it's sort of like, think of that as the sun in the sky, where it's very, very harsh and very jarring. You put the lampshade on, you get that diffusion, and it's much more of a pleasing light. Well, if you have overcast, think of it as a big softbox. That's how I would always describe it. You know, the light in the sky, it's a big over softbox, and it's a nice diffused light, and you get a nice pleasing look. And then as long as you're not taking sky pictures, I mean, again, you know, people like that blue sky effect if you're taking a full landscape, so you have to be more careful. But if you're doing portrait work or you know, anything where you're not necessarily showing the sky, yeah, I mean, that diffused lighting, you can't beat it, you know. So I want to emphasize that that's such an important thing, and it goes against the grain of what most people think.
Yeah, and there are some tricks you can do if you're shooting outside. And then to your point, Marty, what I wanted to specify there with the overcast is if it's an interview setting or you have somebody on camera talent. If you are getting backgrounds or B-roll shots or scenery, lighting is good. You get the harsh shadows, obviously, with the sunlight.
And don't. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt when I hear those terms, but can you tell everyone what you mean by B-roll? That's kind of an old videotape term.
Yeah, so they used to have the term, it's a film term, I believe, to begin with. A-roll is where you have like your primary on-camera acting. B-roll is for cutaway shots. So for my terminology, I always use B-roll as anything besides somebody on camera. So if I'm shooting a show about the fire department, I'm going to get a lot of B-roll. I'm going to go shoot a lot of footage with the fire department that day, depending on what the topic is. In the winter, maybe it's removing snow from the fire hydrants, which if you people live in the snow, make sure you do that. Hopefully that makes sense. So B-roll.
Yeah,
but
Leland's saying like you do those cutaway. If you do an interview, the cutaway shots, you get the nod, you get the smile, you get the laugh, things that you can cut in. If you're cutting down an interview, the cutaway shot gives you that kind of that cut to cover up the jump cut, I guess. You know.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It makes it seamless. Everything that I do is a multi-camera shoot for the most part. I do some single camera stuff, but those are usually interviews that you're going to cover with B-roll to cover the jump cuts, like you said. When you're editing, you're trying to make somebody sound as clean, smooth, and intelligent as possible. When you're doing the live, you get the stutters, the ums, the ifs, where people kind of lose their train of thought. But with produced video, you can take all that out, make it look super clean. So B-roll is stuff that you would use to cover that up, make it seamless. If you don't have a lot of B-roll, another trick to the trade is to vary your shot focal length. So I'd have this tight shot for one, and then I would completely move the camera back and get more of a mid-body shot. So that way when I'm cutting, it looks seamless, even though I've only had one camera and I had no B-roll to cover it. But the outdoor shoot, Marty, to your point about if you want bright sun, blue sky, clouds kind of thing, I have done this before, and it works with varying degrees of success. But if you have like a cityscape background, it's overcast when you're shooting the show. If you mark your camera spot, you can go back later, get the same shot with blue skies, and again do that masking thing, mask around the buildings. So the sky in the background is that pretty blue, but your subject light is well lit. And it just happened that we were doing a bookmobile shoot, and that happened to work out really well for us. So that is another little trick you can try.
I'm going to break a couple original rules of broadcasting or TV production, I should say. One thing that I would do in splicing up an interview, instead of having a jump cut, of course, is I would take a shot of like a white piece of paper, like really close, and I'd flash that as to separate the sound bites, and that would seem to work. Also, as you guys know, in today's world, especially on the internet, depending on how it's used, and it's a fine line between looking unprofessional and looking like it's intentional, as a lot of people do use the jump cuts now just to get that motion effect or that kind of comedic approach to a video. So obviously you have to understand what your message is, what your intent is, who your audience is, and what they're expecting to see.
Yeah, and that goes all the way back to what Marty mentioned beforehand. As long as it's enhancing your message, great. If it starts to distract from your message, then you've gone off track.
It's interesting you mentioned that too, because a lot of the topics that we talk about on the show, again, gearing toward people that are just getting into video and want to take that next step. We've talked in the past, and you might, Derek, I'd love to hear you comment on this. We talked about in the past where people, have the webcam, have the microphone, have the computer and they want to start getting into some fancier stuff. They want to use some third-party video software to either do switching or to maybe add a lower third or some other graphics, maybe do some transition. Maybe they have another camera, they want to do some transitions. And one of the things I always see, especially you can always tell someone new to it, is that they basically break out every single wild transition there is in the arsenal. And one of the things I always bring up to people is and certainly, weigh in on this, is probably 90% of the time when you see television shows produced, you see one or two transitions used all the time. First of all, the most popular one is just the cut. And then you maybe sprinkle in a dissolve. And then the only other one I see, and this is particularly, a lot of sports programming will have this, where if you go to a replay, you might get a DVE, 3D graphic
logo.
To differentiate between the live and replay. I don't know if you want to comment on that as far as your workflow, and is that something similar to how your workflow goes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right there, Marty. All the staff that I have, I train, I always tell them, you're going to always, like 90% of the time, it's actually going to be cuts. Dissolves, you can be a little bit more creative with it. For our church, our multi-camera shoots, when we're live producing shows, people fall in love with the dissolve. They think that's a fun way to transition into and out of stuff. But when you sit back there and watch it, you yourself, even as the director, be like, that's making me sick. I'm so tired of the dissolve. Do something else. There was a college football game years ago where I watched, even the professionals do this. I think it was Fox Sports, not ESPN. I'd like to mention that. But the director was absolutely in love of this wide shot, pan down, zoom in to the action right before the snap. First time I saw it, I was like, fantastic. That was great. Intriguing, brought in the environment, loved it. But then after that, they just kept doing it. They're doing it like every series. And I'm like, I'm sick of that now. Let's not keep doing that. So there are definite rules to that. When you first get your editing software, you have all these new transitions, all these new fun things that you want to try, and it's hard to resist. And I always tell staff, as I experiment with it, look at it, then, usually it helps to walk away from a first cut, come back day 2 with a fresh set of eyes, watch it a second time. Because when you're trying to finish it all in one day, if you have time, if you're trying to finish it all in one day, I need to get this done. I want to finish. And so you're not really looking at it with an objective eye of how can I make this better, or is this distracting, or is this enhancing my message?
Hey, Derek, before we let Jason jump in, it's almost similar to production one in college, where I remember everyone having the thought that in shooting video, they can see with their actual eye what's in the room or what's on the playing field that they could capture, and they try to get a little greedy, and everything's a pan because they want to capture everything, and so they're cutting from pans to zooms, and the static shot is underused by a lot of people just starting.
Amen to that.
I frequently look at less is more many times, and you're right on target with that. It's just resisting and simple. We also talked about on the show, simple and clean. Get that down first, and then you start adding it in. And if it's not enhancing, if you're noticing the transitions, then you're probably not adding anything to it. I want to welcome Jason Bates to the show. Jason, welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Hey, Jason.
Good. Hey, I have a question here for you guys, since you're doing some production tips and whatnot. So, and I've spoke to John. I know John's in the room here. And I've been experimenting with OBS. Are you guys familiar with OBS?
Open Broadcasting?
Yeah. OBS. Yeah, Open Broadcaster. And then using the blabs to simultaneously put them on YouTube Live, for example. So I know it's on a delay, but I keep getting like audio feedback on YouTube. And I don't know where I'm getting it. And so I'm hoping if I kind of explain, and I know it's kind of hard because we're doing this over video right now, but it's if I explain how I've got it set up, if you could kind of help me kind of narrow it down.
It's funny, before you get started, I will preface this by saying that it's similar to how we normally do the show. I actually composite it and using the TriCaster as a video switcher, produce it all and then send it out to multiple CDNs, including YouTube Live, and then also to Blab. Today, I had all kinds of, and this is interesting you bring this up, Jason, I had all kinds of audio issues setting up for today's show. So I just bailed on it and went with plan B, is just strictly Blab. So this is very, very appropriate today, considering my issues today. So yeah, you're not the only one.
The Blab thing, I don't know. Maybe it's within Blab. I know they've been doing, enhancing things here on Blab and whatnot. So, but what I have is a USB. I have my mixer, and then I can kind of show it to you here. I hope this doesn't get too bad here. But I have it going in my USB here, and then it goes into my mixer, right? And the sound comes out here, and then into my mixer, and then it comes back through my mixer. I don't know if I'm doing this right here. Back through here, and then back in through the mic portion, I guess. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Sorry, guys. So I don't know if I'm getting feedback back from the mixer or where I'm getting that loop from. Now, when I go and I'll mute the tab on YouTube, because I go in and see if it's, going correctly, and I use Chrome, so I'll mute that tab. But I did one, and I did that, and then I replayed the YouTube video, and there was no sound. So I've gone in the settings in YouTube Live and tried to mess with that, and I'm not getting anywhere, and I'm getting frustrated. But I talked to Jay. I don't know, or not Jay. What's the guy who does the SEO all the time here on Blab? Have you seen him?
No.
I think his name is Jay. He's the one that kind of turned me on to the OBS system. And
it sounds to me that that definitely it's an audio routing issue. And so you're grabbing I guess we got to understand what your signal path is. So you're grabbing the camera. You're not taking it out of Blab and then putting it back into Blab and then into YouTube Live, are you?
Okay, say that one more time.
Are you using Blab as the production? Are you taking the audio out of Blab and then bringing it into YouTube Live, or are you taking audio and video into into the OBS and taking output from OBS into Blab and then separately into YouTube?
Well, OBS, it goes from Blab, and the audio comes from the mic in through the mixer. So it's not coming through the mic on the camera. And then I have those going into the Blab, and then I do a monitor share of the Blab itself, and then use that monitor share through OBS, who then transports it to YouTube Live.
I think that's where your issue is. Normally the way I do it, and normally the way, if you're going to do something like that where you're going to syndicate the multiple places, you have to composite everything locally, and then you send it out directly. So one time I tried to do the show, and I used Blab I used the same Blab I was in as a production platform. So I actually brought Mark in and our guest in, and I had to mute a tab, and it gets complicated, but it actually did work once I got the audio thing down. But normally the way you do it is you try to bring everything in, and then you ship everything out separately. So I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure where the Blab part comes in.
So bring everything into OBS, which that's what's happening. It's coming into OBS, Open Broadcast System, or whatever it's called, and then it takes it to YouTube. But you can only do one platform at a time. So you can't do, like, at least to my knowledge, you can't do like Twitch and some of these other live streaming platforms, Ustream or whatever, unless you open up a separate OBS. So then you'd have multiple OBSs going, right? You could do that.
Oh, so you're taking. Oh, I see. So are you doing everything on one computer?
Screen share, really? Huh?
Are you doing everything on one computer?
Yeah.
No, that's probably another issue. I need multiple computers for that.
Hey, I'm on a budget, Marty. buddy.
Jason, one thing I might suggest is, depending, are you on a Windows or an iOS platform?
Windows
Sound Mixer in there. If you're able to separate which one is being sent, you could probably get rid of that echo.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
You mentioned it because I went down in the lower right-hand corner and I muted everything except for the blab, the Chrome that's picking up the blab. Muted all my notifications, everything in the system and in the mixer. And I was still getting that echo.
Yeah, to Marty's point, I mean, if you don't have a separate computer, and there might be a plugin, I haven't looked at this, but I was actually dealing in my studio today with some audio return, two-way USB audio return into a computer for a big setup, but it's going through a Biamp Sierra Forte audio processor. It has auto echo cancellation, all kinds of stuff, which is not cheap. But if you have the ability to separate it out, you need to have individual control over those, because by the time the audio gets to your mixer and gets back, there's a delay.
Yeah, it looks like Big Lep the Don or whatever. That's what I think is happening, and I'm wondering if there's a bypass by muting something without muting the live blab. Right, I can't mute the live blab because that kind of defeats the purpose.
Right.
So I don't hear it. I don't hear it in my ear, the replay, unless I listen to just the audio from YouTube. I listen to just if I mute that tab on YouTube Live and I leave this one live, the blab tab open, I don't hear the research reverb or whatever you call it. But if I mute the blab and leave the live unmuted, then I hear the reverb. It's really weird.
Yeah, there's a couple of answers coming along the side. If you can get the software mixer, that's probably your best bet if you're trying to stay in the inexpensive methods of trying to address that. Otherwise, a separate computer. We actually at the church use Wirecast for our YouTube live streams, but we're only sending in one audio signal. I mean, you've got two systems open. The processor is trying to decide which audio is primary, and it's going to create a little bit of a delay. You can get some software that has AEC, auto echo cancellation, that will probably take care of that problem for you, but then you got to pay a little bit of money.
So do you have suggestions on the software or the names of software? Or?
Yeah, Biamp, I don't know if they sell the software individually, but they sell the hardware, and they probably have some software plugins that you can look at. BIAMP.
BIAMP.
Yep, they do all kinds of audio processing. They do it for large room get-togethers, that kind of a thing. They sell the hardware and the software together. So I'm not entirely sure you can get the software separate, but that would be a good place to check. Oh, Marty's pulled it up right there.
And then Leland Best, he's saying here's a link here to audio software as well. So this software then would take the place of a mixer? Is that basically what the software would do?
The software is mixing your audio for you, and Biamps does it automatically, but you can also go in and customize it. So it takes a little bit of practice, trial and error, because each situation has its own challenges. Depends on the room you're in, what kind of bounce back you're getting just off your microphone.
Right.
And another good thing to do, obviously, is anytime you can, get all your technical issues worked out beforehand. Do a tech rehearsal whenever possible.
I've been doing so many tests. I'm like sick of doing tests.
Yeah, it can drive you nuts. I can understand that.
What else can I test here?
Yeah,
but I'm still not solving anything. That's what's frustrating about the test. Tests are meant to solve things, right? And I don't seem to be getting it.
It almost seems to me that you're trying to do. I think Derek brings up a very good point. Anytime you try to do too much on a computer, with the inputs, outputs, and the sound cards and the video, it can overtax the system. And again, the way I'm doing this, and this is a simplified setup for today, but I'm using a TriCaster, which is basically a very specialized Windows computer with a bunch of capture cards in there as a separate computer. So right now I'm using two computers for a simple blab, to do that. Normally I use at least three. So I have my TriCaster, I have my lab computer, and I have my other computer that I'm bringing guest Mark in to the show if I'm doing an HD stream. And that's big key, because you're trying to stream to multiple destinations, and that's where it gets a little tricky.
Yeah, you're in college there, Marty. I'm still like in preschool. So and you want to see, I totally get what you want to do. You want to do, bigger thing, more advanced things, but this is where you start getting to situations where
it gets tough because the more you put on a single computer, it gets more and more complicated. Like Derek brought up the software solution BiAmp, a software mixer. But again, you got to make sure you have everything routed correctly, and
you got to have the processing power.
Yeah, if you're going to multiple destinations like that, where you're going to YouTube Live and Blab, it gets how you get into YouTube Live? Are you doing obviously RTMP to get to YouTube Live, and then Blab is. What was that?
So I was going to maybe was jumping ahead of your question there a little bit, but there's a key in YouTube Live that you then put into OBS, and then it picks up that stream. So you create the event or whatever, and then you get that key, and it picks it up from there. You put it in OBS, that key, and then that's what communicates then with YouTube Live. So then whatever you're showing in OBS, it shows on YouTube Live.
Right, and YouTube Live, which is a great platform because it uses RTMP, so you're going to be able to do HD. The sound quality is going to be, it's more bandwidth. Blab uses what's called WebRTC, which is a completely different. It's more of a virtual camera, virtual audio that goes in there, so that's why you can.
That's what John was saying before, right? Yeah, it's more true live streaming kind of deal, right?
Yeah, so it's really different. And maybe that's what the issue is. So for me to be able to pull off a HD stream and go into Blab, that's where it gets complicated on this end, where I have to composite everything, and then actually I can go to YouTube Live through my TriCaster. It has built-in streaming, and then I use a capture card to take the embedded HDMI audio out of my TriCaster into a capture card to make it a virtual camera. I actually use Wirecast to reformat the video, so I get a pretty complicated setup. But it's two separate computers to be able to do two separate types of streaming, and so maybe that you're in a difficult spot because you're trying to do a lot in two different types of streaming, and
all I want to do, Mark, really, all I want to do is just like take a screenshot of the Blab here and post that as a YouTube Live deal. That's really all I wanted to do.
That's where you might be having an issue too, because that's where maybe your echo's coming from, because because you're taking the output and you got to. There's I think if any of us could see your setup, it's probably more in depth than what we can do on the show, but I think it's tough because I think it's a tough problem because I think you're trying to do more than maybe what your setup can actually do. Again, the key is you can probably do one or the other. I think it's going to be, with your current setup, it's going to be tough to do both well.
Right.
And to Marty's point there, Jason, one thing a lot of manufacturers will tell you is we can do this, but they're talking about like optimal situations, maybe with a supercomputer. There's a lot of different specs that go into it, even though they say this can happen. A lot of times in practice, it doesn't. And I would strongly recommend what Marty said about having separate computers to do it, because you're going to have better luck that way.
Yeah. All right.
I know. I can hear in Jason's voice. I mean, you could get a computer.
Oh, God.
I mean, you could get especially a desktop computer with multiple. There's systems out there that are computer based. You can get multiple capture cards, multiple audio captures, and all that. That's basically what the TriCaster is. It has 4 capture cards. And it's able to so I'm able to bring in multiple sources all at the same time, route them around, and bring them out. But again, that's a specialized piece of equipment. A regular laptop, a regular computer is going to have one video card, one audio card. And then if you're trying to do more than that, that's where it gets a little sticky. And then, there are software solutions, but,
well, how do all the gamers do it? Like a lot of gamers do their gaming and broadcast.
You're only streaming to one service.
Well, no, some of them, like I've seen, do there's like gaming live streaming stuff. Twitch, I think, is one of them, and a couple other live streaming. But they're sending those out simultaneously, like to YouTube Live and to Twitch, for example. And they're playing they may have a supercomputer. I get that. I don't have that. But they are streaming to multiple streams or platforms at the same time. And they at least from what I can read, they're using OBS as part of that platform. So that's where I said, well, maybe I could do the same thing. I'm just not doing a game. I'm just doing video, but live streaming is a little bit different because there's no delay on Blab where there is on YouTube, and maybe there's something there.
And with OBS, you mentioned that it only allows you to stream to one destination at a time.
Unless you open up another OBS, which I haven't figured that out, like having a separate window, a separate tab or whatever, then you can other ones. And I think
that's where you're going to run into problems.
And I don't care to do that. To be honest with you, all I want to do is take the Blab and have another platform like YouTube Live. That was my whole goal.
Yeah. And it doesn't look like you probably, you know what? I mean, to do it right, you're probably going to have to. Yeah, you're probably going to need a second computer, because you're going to need a second computer to be your video switcher. Yeah. And then once you have that, then Blab can be on one computer. You could send it out. It's a little bit. I think what you're trying to do is a little bit more complex for what you have right now.
Here's the crazy thing, though, is that, and Chase is his name. Chase is he does the SEO here on Blab all the time. He's the one that kind of told me about it. He was doing it because he was doing SEO for some websites, and he was broadcasting it here on Blab and on YouTube at the same time, and he was using OBS. And he was using one computer. Now, I'm using a laptop for what I do. He's using a supercomputer because that's what he does for a living. So I don't know. I'd have to ask him if there's another way to do it. And I'm using a USB into the computer where he may not be using a USB for sound and stuff.
He might be using multiple capture cards.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I got to ask him that question.
Yeah. It's tricky.
Oh, well. I thought I'd throw it out there anyway. So
it's a good question, and what's great about it is you're pushing the envelope. But yeah, this stuff, once you start going beyond webcams and simple microphones and simple streaming to one WebRTC, the Blab or Periscope, or the simple stuff.
Yeah.
Welcome to
It sounds simple. Why can't you broadcast in multiple platforms? It sounds simple, but
it does. But you're literally talking about two different types of broadcasting at the same time. Two different technologies.
Right. So, all right, cool. I'm going to jump out.
Thanks, Jason.
Good seeing you guys.
Thanks, Jason.
Seeing you. Man, I'll tell you, this time goes by fast. But it's funny, Derek. We were talking about this before you came on here, and we were saying, man, because Mark sent me your current information. I go, we're going to have Derek on probably if you're up for it, multiple times on future shows to go back. Yeah. What was that?
I would love to come back. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because this has been great, and normally we go an hour. I know Mark has another show to do, but this has been great, and even Jason's issue brings up a good point. A lot of people on Blab are, see the potential of the platform, see the potential of doing video, and then they want to do more, and this is where the fun starts. I mean, I started with Google Hangouts, and I had an ATEM television studio, I went Blackmagic, and then I sold that, and now I'm with the TriCaster Mini, so yeah, it's once you get into what you're doing and what we're trying to do here, and Stephen Haywood, I want to point him out in the room, the Tech Buzz, he's my inspiration. He's doing really incredible things. He's got a studio set up in his house, and once you get to that level, I mean, it is like a whole different ballgame. So, I mean, this is kind of what the inspiration is of Blab, which, has inspired a lot of people to do content. So we would love to have you back in a future week. Both Mark and I will coordinate with you, and maybe we can get into individual focused topics, maybe audio or sure, live streaming, what you do for live streaming. So we didn't really get into that much today. More about your workflow and things like that, but I think that we would love to have you back, and hopefully I can get the more fancier production working as we go and get that working too. But we want to thank you for stopping by today on Behind the Scenes Live. Mark, do you have any? I know I'm going to get you out of here as quickly as I can. If you have anything.
The only thing that stayed with me on Jason's situation is he made mention that he was at the preschool stage. So I'm basically out of the womb, is what he's telling me. The transitive property there. So that's where I am. But it was good to see you, Derek.
Good to see you, Mark. It's been an honor, Marty. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciated the opportunity.
Bye.